Righty. Okay, so welcome everyone to Monday of the Fast Track Mergers and Acquisitions Business Acquisition Program. And today's all about buying a business and getting the strategy for buying a business right, and also how to find those businesses to buy, which is what we call deal sourcing. And we've got an awful lot to get through every single day this week, so I'll save the questions for the very end. And I will tell you later how you can ask me questions between the sessions. Okay, so I'll tell you more about that later on. Everything is recorded. You're going to get the PowerPoint slides. You're going to get today's PowerPoint slides and today's recording tomorrow morning. So please just hang fire to tomorrow morning. In reality, you probably won't want to watch yesterday's again so quickly. This is something more for the future. However, if you miss one of the sessions, I think it would be great if you could watch that session before the next one, simply because it means you get everything in order and everything in a logical sequence. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? Let me tell you first of all how to get the very best out of this program, how to get the most out of our week together. And it's a pretty intense week, so I want to you to get the very best out of it. I want this to be amazing value for money for you. So first of all, please give me your focus. I do notice sometimes when people ask questions that are on sessions that I've definitely covered. So I would always today say, yeah, turn off your emails, turn off your Facebook, give this your full attention, don't look at your text messages, and you'll just get more out of the program because you'll be more engaged. What I'd also say is take notes, not just writing down what I'm saying, but writing down the ideas that come into your mind at the same time. Secondly, I would strongly suggest that you approach this with a very positive, open mind, because some of the things that we're going to talk about quite possibly are things that you have already made up your mind about. So I might be saying something that is contrary to what you already believe. The only things I'm going to be talking about over the course of the week are the ones that work. And I'm going to be teaching you the proven strategies that work and nothing that I've never done myself. So this is all going to be very, very solid content, but it requires your open mind to really make the most of this. And also, I think that the people who become the most successful at buying a business are the people who are the most positive, simply because if you think of it from the perspective of the seller of a business, do they really want to sell to someone who's negative? Negative about life, negative about their company? No, they don't. So having a very positive attitude, I think, really helps you in the world of business buying. And later on, when I ask for questions, let's keep questions relevant to what we've been talking about today, simply because if we want to talk about businesses in administration, we kind of do that on Wednesday. So let's answer the questions according to the subject matter of the day. So what are we going to be doing today? What are we going to be covering? Well, by the end of today, you'll know how to create a deal-making strategy. And the deal-making strategy, I believe, is 50% of your success in buying a business. So a deal-making strategy is understanding which businesses to buy and the criteria that you're going to use to decide whether this is a business that you should pursue or a business that you should bin. So having that deal-making strategy in place is absolutely essential. And I'm going to be showing you how to put that together today. And I would say this is probably where the majority of the questions that I'm asked, not just by people on the Fast Track, but people on my mastermind program as well, they ask me, this is the area they ask me the most questions about, is about strategy. So it's something I love to talk about, and I'm going to be helping you getting your deal-making strategy right today. I'm also going to talk about business brokers, how to understand how the mind of the business broker works. I'm also going to steer you away from business brokers because, quite frankly, you don't need them. You can get better deals without going to business brokers. And the life would just be a lot easier if you have an acquisition methodology that does not require upon you phoning business brokers. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you how to create deal flow. And deal flow is having people contact you saying, I'm interested in selling my business. Now, without a flow of people saying that, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. It's a little bit like, if I can use a property analogy, let's say you wanted to become a property investor. And I guess there's plenty of property investors on the program this week. So you would know then that it probably doesn't make sense, if you want to be a property investor, to go to the estate agent or walk down the street looking for properties to buy and go and view one property. You wouldn't go and view one property and that's it. You go and view lots of properties. And this is what we want to do with deal flow. I want you to view lots of businesses. I want you to have lots of opportunities, because the more opportunities you have, the better deals you will make, the better businesses that you will buy, and the more success you will have. It really is as simple as that. Deal flow is a large chunk of your success in buying a business. And during the course of the program, you're going to be having what we call light bulb moments. They're the moments where you go, aha, eureka, I've got it. That is a really good point. Yeah, I could stop right now and I've got my value from that moment. And those little light bulb moments I'm going to be asking you about at the end of each webinar. And I'd like you to tell me, what was your light bulb moment today? What was the one thing that jumped into your head today as the big idea? So let's cover what we call some jargon, because I want to start us all using the professional language. Because if you use the professional language, you sound like a professional, you come across as a professional, and people will treat you with more respect if you use the correct language. So let's go through what some of these words are. And as the week progresses, there will be more of these, and I will always explain them as we go along. But what I'd like you to do is to start weaving these words into your day-to-day deal-making language, because you know something, even if you ask me a question and you use the right words, you'll get a better quality answer, because I'll know what you mean. We'll both be on the same page and understand what we're talking about. So the first word is consideration, which sounds like being considerate to someone and being very kind to them. But in the context of buying a business, it is the payment for the business. And it's not just money. Consideration can come in different forms. It can come in shares. It can come in some sort of assets. It can come in some sort of future payment. But the consideration, when I say, what is the consideration? You might say, well, the consideration is £500,000. So we understand that is the payment for the business. Now, the thing to remember is that if you start saying, how much do I pay for the business to a, let's say, heaven forbid you ever spoke to a business broker, but let's say it was to a business broker or maybe to your lawyer, that immediately cuts you out as a bit of an amateur. So I would always be saying to you, use this phraseology. It just marks you down as a professional. So say, what is the you might say the consideration is £500,000, and it's made up of several parts. The first part is what we call the initial consideration, and this is the amount that we're going to pay on completion. So anything that we pay on completion, the moment that the business legally becomes ours, or rather the payment is made and then a millisecond later it legally becomes ours, that initial consideration is a good phrase that you need to start using. The deferred consideration is the balance of the consideration, which is paid over time. It's deferred over time. And I should say, I always slip in a few typos into these slides just to keep you on your toes, okay? The typos are completely deliberate. I know where they are, and they're just to keep you on your toes. Completion is, as we've said, the moment the company or its assets legally become yours. Very, very exciting moment where you jump in the air, you punch the air and say, yes, I've completed. EBITDA is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So this is a figure that you will typically use to calculate value. So when you hear people say, I paid 3 times EBITDA, or 3 times earnings, what they mean is they paid 3 times a number that was the equivalent to the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. Now, in the simplest terms, think of it as pre-tax profit. Okay, now later on as the week progresses, I will be telling you why you want to buy businesses based upon a multiple of net profit, but sell them on a multiple of EBITDA. Don't forget, net profit's a lot lower because it's post-tax. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh my goodness, this is technical. Don't worry. This is about as technical as it gets in terms of jargon, and this will become so much easier. By Wednesday, you'll be absolutely flying with this. Deal sourcing is finding businesses to buy. And occasionally someone says, well, could I do deal sourcing for other people? Could I do deal sourcing for other people who are interested in buying a business? Well, I suppose you could, but why would you? Why not find your own businesses? Business brokers are like estate agents. They're the go-betweens who get paid for advertising and selling businesses. Now, let me tell you a rather disconcerting truth about some business brokers. They have zero interest in selling the business. What they are interested in is listing the business for which they get paid, and they could get paid £2,000, £5,000, £10,000, £25,000. Okay, whether they sell it or not is a different matter. They've got their money for advertising the business, and in many cases, people they aren't particularly interested in selling it because that's just like hard work. And another reason, really, to avoid business brokers. Your deal team is your lawyer, your accountant, the person who does any sort of HR, that's the sort of the people aspect, the staff aspect, someone who maybe does due diligence, who may well be your accountant. And I will be telling you later in the week how you can assemble a deal team yourself of people that you trust to do the job properly. Due diligence is the checking that your deal team performs to establish the performance and the validity of the business. So that is the work that your deal team does to check that the business is as it has been represented by the seller. Now, remember that the key part of being the seller of a business is that you are selling it, and you might be a little sketchy with the details simply because you don't want to say anything negative about the business that you're selling. So you present it all in a beautiful light. It's all rainbows and unicorns, and it's a wonderful, wonderful business. However, your job is to find, or rather your deal team's job is to find the things that maybe have been misrepresented in the business that change the deal. Because quite typically, once due diligence starts, the price and terms for a business acquisition change, and they will always go down, they won't go up. Okay, so as you discover things in the business that you don't like, that is going to negatively affect the value of the business, or at the very least, it's going to change the terms on which you pay for the value of the business. I want to introduce to you in this first webinar some concepts that I hope that you will remember and will become part of you. The first is this one. It's get off the org chart, the organizational chart. Now, if you own a business right now, the chances are pretty good, if it's an SME, that you are right there at the top of the org chart. You've got people reporting up to you. Maybe in a small business, you've got everyone in the business reporting directly to you. Now, if that is your position right now, and I've been in that position, it is hard work. It is very draining. You're constantly dealing with other people's problems, and that is where the frustrations come from when it comes to running a business. Your goal is to get off the org chart. When you buy a business, it is not about creating a job for yourself. It's not about giving you somewhere to go every day. So if your current business is really a well-paid, or perhaps maybe a not so well-paid job, you can use an acquisition to remove yourself from the day-to-day running of the business. So how do you do this? Well, let's say you've got your business over here and you buy this business over here and you put them together. It's now a larger business that could justify an MD, a managing director, to run it. It justifies a management team. Quite often with a small business, the owner tells me that they can't justify a management team because it would be too costly. They couldn't quite see, why should they replace themselves with 3 people? The business isn't big enough. I say, well, look, buy another business, maybe buy another couple of businesses, put them together, and then create that management team, maybe people from the businesses that you're buying. And then you've got yourself something that is saleable, okay, that is saleable to someone else. You see, the thing is, when you sell a business, one of the biggest downward drivers of value, so one of the things that negatively impacts value the most, is if the owner is intrinsic to the business. Now, this is something to remember if you're buying businesses. The moment you see that the owner is intrinsic to the business, the value has to go down, okay? Now, you don't want to then be the owner of a business where you have become intrinsic to the business. So that's why this management team, which allows you to get off the org chart, is absolutely essential. It also means you can work on the business rather than in the business. And this is a somewhat hackneyed phrase. And if you've ever come across Michael Gerber, over 30 years ago now, he wrote a book called The E-Myth. It's a very good book. But one of the main concepts in The E-Myth was work on the business rather than in the business. I want you to stop thinking of yourself as someone who owns, for example, an IT company, and start thinking of yourself as someone who buys and consolidates and sells IT companies where other people run the business on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is quite a wordy slide, and I'm going to go through this carefully with you because I want to introduce another concept, because I want to show you the difference between someone who just runs a business and someone who buys and sells businesses. And I want you to think over a 20-year period. Now, 20 years is a long time, but it's going to pass anyway. So let's think about the next 20 years. You've got 20 years of business profits ahead of you. And let's say for very modest, very rounded numbers, that's 100,000 a year over 20 years is £2 million of income. So this business is that you've got here is going to create £2 million of income for you over the next 20 years. And I realize that the value of money changes. I realize that it's unpredictable, but I'm just giving you an illustration. Now, if you start doing what we're talking about this week and actually become a deal maker rather than just someone who operates businesses on a day-to-day basis, and let's say over those 20 years, you sell 4 businesses and you sell them for 7x. Now, a 7x multiple is 7 times that EBITDA that we were talking about earlier. So that means it's 7 times pre-tax profits. And you do that over the next 20 years. So you've got one person who just runs a business, and you've got one person who becomes a deal maker, and over the course of the 20 years, sells those businesses for 7 times. Now, that 7 times is 7 times annual profits, which is equal to 7 years of profits. And we're going to do that 4 times. We've just added 28 years of additional income within that 20-year time frame. Now, using our very simple numbers of 100,000, that's 2.8 million of additional revenue. So the doer would earn 2 million over 20 years. A deal maker earns 4.8 million over exactly the same time frame by doing what we're talking about this week. And the only difference between the doer and the deal maker is that the deal maker has learned how to buy a business. So aren't you glad that you're in the right place this week? Because this is the difference. Now, you would appreciate that the business owner typically earns more than the employee. The deal maker earns more than the business owner by implementing what we're talking about this week. Not just learning it as a theory, but actually implementing it. Here's another concept I want to share with you. How do you pay yourself a deal fee? If you're taking notes, write down deal fee and put a big circle around it, because this is a very intriguing concept. How do you pay yourself a deal fee? Let me tell you how you do it. A deal fee is a payment that you take out of the business that you buy to compensate you for being very clever, figuring out that you want to go and buy a business, doing the hard work, finding the business to buy, putting the deal together, negotiating the deal, and nursing it over the line. And the thing is, up to that point, you haven't been paid for your time, have you? So you want to pay yourself a deal fee. Now, people in private equity, and remember, private equity are professional business buyers. Private equity always engineer a deal fee into an acquisition. And the best way, or I suppose the easiest way of engineering a deal fee into an acquisition is by making sure that any financing you obtain to buy the business, possibly asset-based financing, so you're financing the acquisition, and we will talk about this later in the week, don't worry, financing the acquisition based upon refinancing the assets within the company, there's always a slice of money that's taken out as a deal fee. Now, I know that people always want to ask me the question, what is the most tax efficient way of getting that deal fee out of the company? It might be some money in the bank. It might be the business becomes very profitable very quickly. You can take some money out. People always say, how do I do that in the most tax efficient way? Now, bearing in mind we have people from all around the world on the program this week, there is absolutely no way I can understand the tax system. In fact, most accountants don't understand the tax system of one country, let alone the tax system of every country in the world. This is where you need a tax advisor. And there are three things that I never do on this program. And if we work together in the future, you'll note that I never do this. I never give tax advice. I never give legal advice, and I never give accounting advice. I'm not qualified to do so. It would be professionally incorrect for me to do so. The only things I'm going to be doing is telling you what I do, but I always say to people, everyone's different. Everyone's tax situation is different. Everyone's legal situation is different. Everyone's jurisdiction is different. You're in different parts of the world. You always need to have on your deal team someone who can advise you on these things. So never make it up yourself, never try and figure out how to do it yourself, and only take advice from someone who's suitably qualified in your jurisdiction. But if you can pay yourself a deal fee, and this is the exciting part, if you can pay yourself a deal fee, you can make money when you buy the business. You can make money when you buy a business, not just when you own it and not just when you sell it. You see, most people think that you just make money while you own the business, the cash flow coming out of the business to you. And then, of course, everyone's figured out that you make money when you sell the business. But what if you could make money when you buy the business? How do you do it? You make sure that part of your deal structure contains this deal fee. And I know people in the private equity world who engineer such a large deal fee that, quite frankly, what happens after they've paid themselves that deal fee with the business is almost a little bit boring. If the business doesn't perform great, who cares? They've got paid in advance in a way. If the business never sells 3-5 years into the future, then it doesn't matter. They've already got their fee out of the business. And the fee for people in my mastermind program can be tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds, but I also know people in the private equity world who take a deal fee of millions of pounds upon an acquisition. So something worth considering. And if you've never thought of that before, that might well be your light bulb moment of the sorry, my daughter's just stepped in. So this is another concept I want you to consider. Buying a business is 80% a sales and marketing process and 20% a legal and accountancy process. You see, the thing is, I think most people think that buying a business is all about the legals and it's all about the accountancy. Well, that bit's important, but actually, you're not going to be doing that bit. That bit's going to be done by your deal team, not by you. So that's outsourced, if you like. The sales and marketing process, which is the fun part, which you're probably going to do all yourself, definitely at the start, is really where it's at. You see, if we can find the right business to buy, if we can sell that business owner on selling to us using the deal structure that's preferable to us, then we've got ourselves a business to buy. And then the lawyer and the accountant can take care of all of the details. Now, I've simplified that, of course, but generally speaking, if we can get that sales and marketing process right and get a motivated seller who wants to sell to us, then the legal and the accountancy bit is just a little boring bit at the end. Very important, but let's get someone else to do that, because quite frankly, you and I aren't qualified to do to write the contract or to do any of the accountancy. So this is the big question. The big question is, what is your strategy? What is your strategy, and what type of businesses should you buy? What type of businesses should you avoid? And I keep saying, and I will keep saying it, is that 50% of your success when buying a business is knowing that you've got a very clear strategy and you're buying the right businesses that slot into that strategy. Now, I'm not expecting you to end up with a clear strategy as a result of today's webinar. I have people on Mastermind, and it takes them months sometimes to get their head around a strategy. So I don't expect it to happen for you today, and I don't necessarily expect it to happen for you this week. If it does, that's wonderful. You're ahead. Some of you might even have a strategy. So what we're going to be doing now is potentially refining that strategy just to make it a little bit sharper and with a little bit more focus. Now, there are six types of company that you can buy. Now, in the center of this diagram, you'll see I put your core business. So this is the business that you've got already. Now, that applies to about 50% of the people on this program. The other 50% who don't yet have a business but want to get into business, don't worry about that. It will make more sense after you've made your first acquisition, because your first acquisition becomes your core business. Okay, so that slots in there later. So the first is clearly is a very simple type of business, a product business. So a business that sells a product. Now, this could be because you already sell a product and you want to sell more products, or it could be that you are currently a service business, and a very fast way of growing your service business is to add a product business. Okay, so let's have a very simple example. Let's say it's a carpet cleaning business, and you add a product business which could be selling carpet cleaning materials into those offices or into those homes. So now you can sell products as well as the service. You might think, well, if I sell those products, will people not come to me to the service? Well, that may be their intention, but people like a service as well. The other type of business, number two, is a service business. So it's the complete flip side of what we've just talked about. So you have a product business and you add a service business. So what we're doing is we're building out a little bit of a spider's web of businesses that all link together, that create a group that one day you can sell. Next is, you should look at your suppliers. Who's in your supply chain? So a good example of this was someone on Mastermind who was in the fine art business, and he was spending £500,000 a year on the wooden packing crates that would be used to ship the art. And he knew, I don't know how he knew, but he knew that the markup being put onto these packing crates was actually 50%. So a 50% markup. Now, his plan, and it was a very good plan because it worked very well, was to buy a packing crate manufacturer. Therefore, his costs of creating packing crates for his artwork dropped by half. So he saved himself £250,000 a year. I think he only actually paid £300,000 for the packing crate provider anyway. And as a result, he could now offer this supply to his competitors. And as a result, he's now got another business and another income stream. Now, on the other side of the coin, again, are the distributors. I had a client who bought a courier business because he was spending a fortune on couriers and just saw that money going out the door every month. And he thought, well, if I own a courier business, then not only can I courier everything that I send out at cost, I can also provide that service to other companies. And of course, when I buy a business, I've already got a customer list and they've already got that cash flow. And it just makes an awful lot of sense. Your competitors, I mean, there was a huge satisfaction in buying a business that is a competitor of yours, and also eliminating your competitor from the marketplace is just good for your business as well. Now, a competitor might be a direct competitor. It might be a company that does something pretty similar to you, in a different part of the country. So it doesn't have to be a competitor down the street. It could be a competitor in a different region, a different part of the country. So you start to build a national group or a regional group rather than staying just local. And then we've got complementary businesses. So these are product and service businesses that sell items or sell services that are somehow linked to your core business. So it's not the same product or service, but they are linked somehow to your core business. And as a result, you make your existing business far more stable because now we've got lots of different income streams. And I think that what the pandemic has proven is that if you've got multiple income streams and one or two of them are cut off because of something that no one was ever expecting, having those multiple income streams is a very, very valuable and useful thing to have. And remember, if you don't have a business yet, your first acquisition, and we'll talk about the criteria for your first acquisition in a moment, will go into the center of that, and then you build out. Now, let me give you another piece of jargon. It's a buy and build strategy. So a buy and build strategy is where you buy businesses to build a group, and your first investment, which might be your existing company, or it might be the first company that you buy, is what we call a platform investment. It provides the platform for all the other businesses to sit on. So if you, and I'm speaking now to the people who own a business right now, why don't you reposition your company for the highest possible exit value? If you own a small business, your sale value in the future, your exit value is not going to be wondrous. So why don't you do something about it now? Why don't you do something about it by positioning or repositioning your company for the highest exit value? If you know that companies in your sector don't sell for very much money, well, now is the time to do something about it. Make your business more valuable by doing some of this. So let's talk now a little bit about defining the sector. Defining the sector. So the sector is the industry or the profession that you're going to buy a business in. So that's what I mean by sector. First of all, I always say to people, keep it simple. Let's not overcomplicate the strategy, because if the strategy is too complicated, it just won't work. And 3 years ago, I had someone on Mastermind who had a strategy that was forever changing, but it was so complicated, I struggled to understand it. I mean, if you can't explain it in one sentence, you probably don't have the clarity that you need. But when we're defining the sector, we want to keep it really, really simple and actually quite high level at this early stage. And I always say, buy in a sector that you already understand, or something that you can learn quickly, or something you can get help to understand. Okay, so let's keep it simple. Let's buy a business in a sector that you already understand, something you can learn quickly, and something you can get help to understand. And I don't believe it for one moment if anyone says to me, "Oh, I don't understand anything." um, we can understand a business by being a customer of a business. We can understand a business by talking to the owner of a business. I was waiting to pick up some dry cleaning, and I was talking to the guy who owns the dry cleaning shop. And I said, "So tell me about this business. How does it work?" And he said, "You don't make money with one." I said, "Oh, really? That's interesting." He said, "Yeah, you need more than one." He said, "You can't make money because your overheads are so high. You can't make money with just one dry cleaning outlet or any sensible money. You need more than one." I said, "How many have you got?" He said, "3." I said, "That's very interesting." So you can start to discover how a business works just by talking to the owner of a business. I mean, I also know my limitations. I mean, I don't know anything about technology. And I don't know anything about, I don't know anything about lots of things, but let's use technology as an example. I would never even attempt to buy a business in the technology field. I did actually sit down with someone a couple of years ago who was selling a business that did some sort of barcoding for supermarkets. And I was talking to him, and he was talking to me, and I realized after half an hour, I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I mean, it would be absolutely crazy, wouldn't it, to go and buy a business in a sector you don't understand. Let's use that property analogy again. It's pretty easy to get your head around buy to lets. You buy a property, a tenant goes in the property, the tenant's rent pays the mortgage, and what's left over after tax is yours. Pretty simple to understand. But when it gets into commercial property, it gets a little bit different. The valuations change, the financing changes, and then you get into large commercial properties. Oh, you get into a shopping center. If you're used to buying buy-to-lets, to go from a buy-to-let to a shopping center is a huge leap. So I would say it's something that you need to understand or learn quickly, or something you can get help to understand. So I've been buying businesses recently in the what we call the early years sector, which is children's day nurseries to you and me. And I knew very little about children's day nurseries at the start of this project. And I started talking to people and asking them to explain to me how it and worked. And some people said, "Oh, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. All this Ofsted, which is the government regulatory arm for education. Ofsted, absolute nightmare, absolute nightmare." And people who've been in this sector for decades still say, "Oh, it's an absolute nightmare." And there's a lot of form filling, and you've got to obviously maintain your professional requirements. But in our group, I don't do that. I have someone else who does all that for me. So it actually allows you to do more. I mean, I think that you should never limit yourself. I think the sky is the limit. However, we need to be sensible, especially about our first acquisition. And when I hear people struggle with their first acquisition, they kind of say, "Well, Jonathan, I didn't really understand the business." So how do you find someone to help you understand a business? Well, LinkedIn is a pretty good start. There's a new sector actually that I'm looking at moving into, which is NVQ and apprenticeship training. And I put a post on LinkedIn, and I said, "Can anyone sort of help me to understand this sector?" And later that day, or actually, no, it wasn't. I had several emails immediately, but then the next day, I spoke to someone who is actually a client. I didn't realize this was his background, and he explained to me how it all works. So you can just go out and ask for help, and you'll find that people will give you the help. And also, of course, you want someone who can run it for you, and that's very important. I would also say that if you are absolutely obsessed with a sector and you know it all better than everyone, don't be tempted to know it so well that you end up giving yourself a job. You always want someone who can run it for you. And here are sectors to potentially avoid. And the reason I put potentially is because there are always exceptions. There are always so many exceptions, but these are generalities. So anything you don't understand, that's obvious by now. Retail right now, terrible time. I mean, to be fair, I've been saying it's been a terrible time. It's a terrible sector for years, but it's clearly just terrible right now. Online retailing, an awful lot better than retailing in the high street. Highly regulated markets. Now, there are exceptions. So I have a client, Brian, who's an IFA, which is an independent financial advisor. You need to have certain, there's lots of regulation around being an IFA, and you can only buy an IFA regulated type business if you are that person already. So in actual fact, for him, buying mortgage advisors and mortgage brokers, that works very, very well for him because he's already got the badge of honor in that sector. Industry subject to legislation. Again, there are so many exceptions because like, for example, I've given you one already. So in the nursery sector, lots of legislation. However, I've got someone who deals with all that for me. The interesting thing is actually it's probably not as complicated as everyone seems to make out. You've just got to make sure you run a good business. Industries being disrupted. There are so many, I suppose anything that's moving online, unless you buy a business that's already moved online in that sector. So, everyone's got their favorite examples of businesses being disrupted. The one that always jumps to mind is Uber, is the traditional taxi business. So this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a Venn diagram, and I bet you haven't seen one of these since you were at school, of opportunities. What opportunities can we find? What is it you want to achieve, and what skills and knowledge? What do you know about? And in the middle is the pound sign. Put a dollar sign or whatever sign you prefer in there. Now, the opportunities, quite clearly, there's no good wanting to buy businesses in a certain sector if there are no business owners wanting to sell in that sector. So there has to be opportunities. And the ideal scenario is where there are lots of opportunities. And I'll show you how to test whether there are later. And then your personal goals. I have no problem with people having very clear financial personal goals. Some might argue it's not a personal goal if it's financially, it's a business goal. But if you've got very clear, and let us say that your goal is to have £1 million post-tax. So you've got £1 million sitting in your bank account as your slush fund, as your rainy day fund, and then you can proudly wear the badge of I'm a millionaire. Okay, so that's a great goal, and that's a really, really good goal. I read something about this recently, actually. Brian Tracy, I've mentioned Brian Tracy already today. I mentioned him before we started the webinar. So it says that becoming a millionaire is not just about the money. It's about the person you become in the process, because you have to change the way you think and the way you act if you want to gain that level of wealth. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, if you want to be a millionaire and you want to do it within a reasonable time frame, let's say 2 to 3 years, which is very achievable, then all you have to do is to buy businesses that allow you to get there. So you probably wouldn't be buying businesses that turn over, let's be ridiculous for the sake of the example, 20,000 a year, because it's going to take you an awful lot of time to get to £1 million of profit out of those businesses, or £1 million from the sale of those businesses. So you would look at larger businesses because, quite frankly, they will get you to your goals larger. And then your skills and your knowledge, or to add an extra layer to that, the skills or the knowledge that you buy in. Now, a lot of people will help you with skills and knowledge free of charge, like my NVQ people, they help me free of charge. At some point, they might want some sort of consultancy fee. And at some point, they might say, we want some equity in this business because we're helping you. And I would be a little cautious around that. I'd be a little cautious because don't rush giving equity to people that you don't know, because it usually ends in tears. Let that person be around for a while, okay? You might discover that the moment that they're asking for equity is the moment that they've also given you all the knowledge they could ever possibly give you. They don't know anything else. The knowledge was skin deep anyway. It seemed impressive to you because you didn't know any different. But now you know more about the business. I mean, I had a lot of people advising me on the nursery business, telling me to do this, that, and the other. And a lot of it, actually, with the benefit of hindsight, wasn't particularly amazing advice. It was very good advice when I didn't have any knowledge. But now looking back, thinking, well, yeah, I think I know pretty much as much as they knew. So these are our combinations. So where does the opportunity meet with your goals? How will your skills and knowledge help you? And can you work on the love while you delegate the hate? Now, I'm terrible at paperwork. I'm terrible at bookkeeping type stuff. I'm terrible at people management. And usually the things that you're not very good at are the things you don't enjoy as well. So you want to, in this whole business acquisition process, be outsourcing, be delegating out anything that you don't enjoy doing. Because I know from people that I've worked with for years that the moment they decide to become a deal maker and the opportunities start presenting themselves, life becomes an awful lot more fun. What you don't want to do is taint that fun with doing things that you don't enjoy. So delegate out all of those things. And I would say your best time as a deal maker is spent looking for opportunities, looking for businesses to buy, having conversations with business owners and putting deals together. And then I would be letting someone else run those businesses, and you reap the rewards. Now, there are two clear paths of business acquisition. There is the profitable business and there's the distressed business. Let me give you the why choose profitable and the why choose distressed. And then I will tell you what I think you should be doing. So a profitable business gives you instant income. There is usually an established management team, and that's good for you because now that management team work for you. It's easy to bolt on a profitable business onto an existing business. A distressed business, quite often you can buy a distressed business for £1. There's no finance needed, quite clearly. A distressed business where you can buy assets and contracts. You don't buy shares, you buy the assets. And we'll be talking later on in the week about the difference between buying shares and buying the assets. And liabilities can be managed. And there's usually scope for cost cutting in a distressed business. You bring fresh energy and perspective, and there's huge ROI potential once you turn things around. You would have heard on the introductory webinar me talk about a business I bought a few years ago, which I bought for £1, and that turned into a very strong seven-figure, multi-million-pound sum 11 months later. So the ROI, return on investment potential, is huge. But this is what I think you should do. Buying a distressed business is a lot of work. I mean, it's full on, and you've got to move really, really fast, and you've got to have the time to be able to do that, and you need a really good team around you. Buying a profitable business is a lot more relaxed because it's making money already, and there's an awful lot to commend that. I would say for your first acquisition, look for a profitable business as your platform, because that gives you a strong foundation and that gives you an infrastructure. So I used IT companies as an example before. So let's use that as an example now. So you've got this IT company that you buy that is a profitable IT company, and it's got an infrastructure. It's got a billing system. It's got a customer care system. It's got a work allocation. I don't know what it would be called in IT, but yeah, there's a way of allocating the jobs out to the engineers or whatever it might be. It's got suppliers. It's got distribution. It's got all that in place, and it's making some money. Might not be making a huge amount, but it's making a bit of money. And in this situation, it's not about it's making a profit because you want to take money out. It's making a profit because that's a big sign that something is working. Okay, something is working. It's making a profit. Something is working. So that could be your platform investment. And then what you're going to do is maybe look for a distressed business, let's say another IT company. You go and buy the assets, you go and buy the contracts. That's all you buy. You just buy the contracts, leave everything else behind. And now, because you've got an infrastructure for an IT company, you can just pop those contracts into your existing customer service, work allocation, billing system, all of these things, and now you've got a bigger business. So I would strongly suggest, if you want the fastest success, your first business makes a profit, even if it's a small one, because it says that something is working. Okay. I kind of like distressed businesses. I like the challenge. I like the gamble of, if I put some time and energy into this, can I turn this into something amazing? But they are harder work, and it depends whether you've got the time, energy, and enthusiasm, I suppose. So let's talk a little bit about geography of a business that you'd buy. Where is it? I would always say, keep it close until you have a trusted management team. You don't want to buy a business 500 miles away, where if there is something you need to go and do, it's going to take you a day to get there, or longer perhaps. You don't want to do it. Sometimes people say, I want to buy my first business, I want to buy it in another country. Why? You have no experience, no management team, and you're going to buy a business in another country as your first business? As a business in the future, yeah, absolutely. But it's your first acquisition. So keep it close, not because you want to go there every day. It's because you could go there every day if you wanted to or needed to. Now, the size of the business that you buy is interesting. And this is the defining factor. It needs to be big enough to make a profit once you've replaced the owner, so you can pay yourself. Now, this is really what we've said already. But why am I saying once you've replaced the owner? Sometimes owners take very little out of a business, especially in the year leading up to a sale, because they want to make their profits look as good as possible. And that's something that is looked out for in due diligence, because quite often the owner of a business needs to be replaced by at least 2 other people. Let me give you, in my nursery businesses, quite often the owner at lunchtime does all the cooking, and in the evening does all the accounts. Now, where am I going to find, and there's also the manager of the business. Where am I going to find someone who can be a manager plus a cook plus a bookkeeper? I mean, that's 3 different roles. So I've got to find 3 different people. So I've got to factor those costs into the cost base of the business. Now, the question then is, does it make a profit once I've done that? If it still makes a profit, great, because don't forget, that profit is yours. Now, there are exceptions. Let's say our IT business that we just talked about, there is a distressed IT business and it's not making a profit, but it could do if you got rid of all the overhead. The overhead is the offices, the staff, all the fixed cost in the business, maybe utilities, all of these things, insurance, all these things go, and you just want those IT contracts. Because you've got this infrastructure that we talked about, you can just pop the IT contracts into that infrastructure, and all of that profit goes to the bottom line, because you don't need a bigger office. You don't need more staff. You don't need another receptionist. You just add those contracts into your existing business. I see people do this very, very successfully in Mastermind with SEO, search engine optimization, digital marketing, that sort of thing. They do it very, very well with that. Because once you've got the infrastructure, you can just pop the contracts into that existing infrastructure. You also might want to think about the outcome. What is it you want to achieve? Do you want cash flow? Now, cash flow is great. If you've got a business that's producing cash flow, you might say, you know what, I'm not really going to tinker with this business. If it's making money for me every single month, then maybe I'll see if I can increase that amount of money. But if I'm happy with it, well, you know what, I'll just let that money come out of the business to me every single month. Maybe you want to make your existing business bigger and more profitable. Maybe you want to buy a business for the experience. I think the biggest learning curve is your first acquisition. It's got to be your first acquisition. So you might want to buy a business as a result of this program just for the experience. You say, well, you know what? It doesn't matter if it's not the world's largest business. I just want to buy a business for the experience and understand the process. Because right now, remember, it's theoretical. You want to turn it into practice. And as we said, buy and build, and then create a group that you can then sell. Now, I would say in our year-long programs, the buy and build strategy is the most utilized strategy. And I've got to say that is typically in business where the money is really made. And maybe you just want to buy a business to flip it. You've heard of people, maybe me, where I bought a business and sold it a short time later. Now, I would say that's great, but wait till you've got a little bit more experience, because it can go wrong if you don't know what you are doing. But these are some of the outcomes that you might want to consider when defining your strategy. So what does an attractive business look like? What does a business, an attractive opportunity look like? I would always buy a business in a growing market, because you just get caught up in the wave and the market's growing and you grow with that market. You kind of don't have to do anything clever because the market is growing anyway. You want a business where it's possible to find customers easily. One of your questions when you're chatting with a business owner is, what marketing do you do? How do you find customers? How many inquiries do you get? When you told me that you run an advert in this magazine. When you run the advert in the magazine, how many times does the phone ring? That sort of question. Maybe you want to buy a business that has some sort of patent, some sort of, we call it rather dramatically, a secret or a toll bridge or a moat. There's a moat built around the business. Basically, it can't be copied too easily. Maybe there's a contract. So just to let you know, from my research into NVQ companies, there is a toll bridge, if you like, to being an NVQ company. There is a register of NVQ companies. I think it's about 3,500 companies on the register, and you can't get on the register. You can't get on the register. No one can. You can't go and start an NVQ trading business. You won't get on the register. They haven't opened the register for 5 years. So buying a business allows you to get on the register. So just worth thinking about. A business that's scalable. And if you've got ambitions for this business, then is the business ever going to be bigger than it is at the moment? Is it possible to make it bigger? Has the business relied upon the skills and the talents of the owner, and once they've gone, the business will never get any bigger than it is now? Does the business have management? I mean, this is probably the 5th or the 6th time I've mentioned this today. You've got to have management. If you try and run this business by yourself, you will just end up with a nightmare. A business that has a sustainable model. Amazingly, I see on such a regular basis businesses that just go along like this. This is their sales every year. That year it's this, a little bit down, a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit up. And then the year before they sell, this crazy spike of sales. Now that's just not sustainable. And the owner always tells you, oh, yes, it's going to be wonderful next year, year after. I'll show you when we're structuring the deal tomorrow and the next day how to deal with that. Does the business have room for improvement? And I like business. That doesn't mean that they're distressed. It can be a profitable business with room for improvement. And you might think, well, if there's such easy ways of finding improvement, why didn't the owner do it? Quite often it's because they're tired, they've had enough, they're at retirement age, the pandemic has just taken all enthusiasm away from their enjoyment out of their lives. So is there room for improvement? Now, we'll talk about this later, but we're going to be paying for the past and the present. We're not going to be paying for the future, but you want there to be a bit of potential in there. And here is a key point that we're going to come back to again in a moment. An attractive opportunity is a business with a committed seller, someone who's committed to selling, who wants to sell. So here are my 10 critical rules for success. You can't tell a good deal from a bad deal without deal flow. You need lots of businesses to look at. You don't marry the first person that you meet. You don't buy the first business that you look at. You've got to look at a lot of them. You'd be amazed though how many people, they look at one business and say, this is the business I've got to buy. You've got to have lots of businesses to look at. You pay for the past, you buy it for the future. And so many owners, and we'll talk about this during the week, will try and value their business based upon what it could do. I actually had someone say to me last week, they said, I said, is there, it was a nursery school. I said, is all the space in the nursery used? And they said, oh, you could expand it because we've got this land at the side. I went, right. So are there unused rooms? They went, no. You could build out an extension. I said, okay. So the only way to expand it is for me to build an extension to the property. Yes. And buy that additional land from you. Yes. Okay. Well, that's just crazy because he can't value his business as it is now based on what I could do if I spent another few £100,000. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But you'll be surprised how many owners think that's perfectly legitimate. Your job is not to find the perfect business. Your job is to find a business you can make great. If you just look for the perfect business, you'll say no to every single business. You've got to ask yourself the question, what are the skills necessary to make this business a success? And then who is going to provide them? What are the skills necessary to make this business a success and who is going to provide them? Because it's not going to be you. And then what could kill this business? What are the risks? What could go wrong in this business? Doesn't mean you don't buy it. It means that you need to manage that risk in your chosen deal structure. And then you've got to remember, you've got to fall in love with the profit potential, not the business. The more emotional about buying a business you are, the worse deal you'll get. You can't be emotional about it. Now, we all sometimes look at a business and go, yeah, I really want that one. But here's the thing. You've got to say to yourself, I really want that one. But if I don't get it in the deal that I want, I'm not going to buy it. If the numbers don't stack, I'm not buying it. And it's an awful lot easier to say that when you've got other people knocking on your door saying, Jonathan, would you like to buy my business? And I've been disappointed momentarily many times, but you just move on because you got good deal flow. Sometimes it's very tempting, and this is a confidence thing, to say, I need to bring on board partners. And they feel it's very, let's bring on, I'll be more successful with a partner. Now, I say to people, avoid partners. You can bring in people's skills and knowledge on a consultancy basis. You just pay them for what they do. When they, quite frankly, when they stop being useful, that's it, they've gone. It's harder to get rid of them as an equity partner. But if you insist on ignoring me, and you do have someone who has 5%, 10%, 15%, 20% maybe, then you've got to have a solid shareholders agreement. And a shareholders agreement might cost you £2,500, £3,000, but it's absolutely an essential document if you're going to have a partner. It solves the problems before they become problems. I would always say to people, avoid startups. Don't buy businesses that have been running for less than 5 years. I love it when someone tries to sell me a business that doesn't have any customers and they say how many customers it's going to have. I say, well, look, get all those customers and come back when it's got the customers. Of course, they don't want to do that because they've already figured out it's going to be really hard work, and they figure they can sell you their IP, their intellectual property. And usually it's not particularly intellectual. And then avoid franchises. There's a massive market for franchisees selling on their franchises. You don't want to do that because a franchise is not really a business. It's a bit of a halfway house between working for someone else and working for yourself. You feel like you're working for yourself, but you're really working for the franchisor. Because you can't change the name, you can't change the branding, you can't change the website, you can't change the marketing, you can't change the prices, you can't change the systems. It's very inflexible. So avoid franchises. And I would say, there's another little typo just to keep you on your toes. Spread your risk and buy more than one business. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your risk over time, not all at the same time. Don't buy them all on the same day. But spread your risk and buy more than one business, but you never know what's around the corner. And I think that coronavirus has proven no one knows what's around the corner. No one knows, okay? So spreading your risk is always a very solid idea. But what you're looking for is what we call the star deal. So let's talk about the star deal. There are 5 elements to the star deal. And this is the deal where the stars are going off in your eyes with excitement. This is the winning deal. You want a seller who is clearly motivated to sell. If they are not motivated to sell, then it's going to be a deal where you come out of it worse, because the most terrible situation is where you as the buyer become a motivated buyer and you really want to buy the business, and the seller's kind of not that bothered, but you really want to buy it. No, it should be around the other way. They really want to sell it, but you're not that bothered because you're looking at all these other businesses over here. So we'll talk about why people are motivated to sell later, but you want someone who's clearly motivated to sell. How can you tell if they're motivated to sell? Well, you ask them. And I'm going to give you all the questions on tomorrow's webinar of what to ask them. You ask them. How do you spot a seller who's not motivated? They say things like, well, yeah, I'd be interested at the right price. Now, it may be just a bit of a sort of a silly, cheesy, amateurish negotiating tactic, and you kind of don't even listen to what they're saying. But the best thing for anyone to say to you is that they want to sell yesterday or tomorrow or the sooner the better or as soon as possible, and then they give you the reason. I want to retire. I want to sell this business as quickly as possible. Second is valuation. You want a seller who has a sensible valuation on their business, and they are sensible about it. And I would say that this is probably about 40 to 50% of sellers. The other 50 to 60% aren't sensible about valuation. I always look for a business with potential. So if I buy it and pay a price for a business at this size, can I very quickly turn it into a business at this size? In other words, I end up buying a business at this size and I've only paid this price for it. That's what I'm looking for. A business where I can structure the deal the way I want to structure it. And structure can be, I want to buy the assets. I don't want to buy the shares. The structure could be, I want to pay for this business over 5 years. I'm not going to pay for it in one go. So do I have a seller? Do I have a deal where they will go along with my structure? Now, clearly, not everyone is going to go along with your structure. That's just the way it is. I mean, you're not going to buy every business that you talk to. But I want the structure to work in my favor rather than a structure that works in the favor of the seller. And I want a deal that's simple. I want 1 or 2 owners. I don't want multiple owners in multiple different countries where no one can ever get together and they're going to spend a month having a board meeting about it. I like things that are quite straightforward and quite simple, because if they're complicated at the beginning, believe me, as it gets closer to completion, it'll be so complicated, you'll wonder why you ever started. So what are the reasons for selling that I'm looking for? I believe that every business is for sale at some point. So the seller, the owner, might not be interested in selling today, but that doesn't mean that tomorrow morning they won't wake up and be very interested in selling. You might believe that the reason people want to sell their business is because they want financial freedom, because that might be why you want to sell your business one day. But I don't believe that is even in the top 3 reasons for people wanting to sell their business. Maybe they've got another business that they want to concentrate on. People are typically very poor at multitasking and can't handle more than one business at a time. So they want to sell their business because they've got another business. The business that they want to sell in that case usually hasn't had much love and attention recently. The correct terminology, by the way, and this might make you laugh, but it is actually the correct terminology, is that the business is unloved. So if you're talking to people in let's say sort of in finance or private equity, you might say, I have a particular affection for unloved businesses. And they know exactly what you mean. It's a kind of a nicer way of saying distressed. Maybe the owner wants to get off the treadmill. I think that's becoming more and more apparent from the people I'm speaking to. And it's become too stressful for them. There's a lot of financial pressure on them and the business. Maybe they've personally guaranteed some of a loan into the business and they're worried about repaying the loan. Quite often, rather unfortunately, I suppose, you do hear people use health as the reason for selling. And you have to tread delicately and carefully with that. Family reasons, we don't never dig too deeply into this, but quite clearly people are saying, yeah, the reasons are personal. Retirement is actually the number one reason. The number one reason for selling is retirement. And when we talk about deal sourcing later, what some of my mastermind clients do is that they source data based upon the age of the directors. So if the directors are, and I realize that 55 isn't the retirement age, but people from the age of 55 might be more likely to be looking to sell for retirement reasons than someone who's 35. So retirement's the big one. The pandemic, quite similar to a pandemic, but not quite the same, or recession is this recession that's starting. People want to get out now before it could get an awful lot worse before it gets better. But if you understand the pressure points, if you understand why someone wants to sell, that is going to give you so much negotiating power, Now, interestingly, if you do go and talk to brokers, and I really don't want you to, because you don't need to, and you'll get worse deals. Brokers are professional negotiators. If you're not yet a professional negotiator, you're going to come out of this worse. Okay, so you need to get good at negotiating, get good at talking about this before you talk to brokers. But brokers will not let you near these emotional pressure points because they know that that is your leverage. They might just say, oh, it's retirement. Where if you actually spoke to the owner, we've got a flight booked to Australia on the 1st of January. We are emigrating and we need to sell before the end of the year. Now, the broker will never let them say that to you. If you're dealing directly with the owner using the methodology I'm going to teach you today, you'll get the real truth as to why they want to sell. What I thought would be useful is to give you an overview of the process so that you can understand the process for buying a business from start to finish. So you get like an umbrella view of the whole thing, because we've jumped into some detail here. And I just want to step back a little bit and give you this overview. What we're going to do is we're going to compile a target list of people who have a business in the sector that we're interested in buying in. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized that what I'm going to do, sorry, my PowerPoint's a bit messed up here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to bring all these up on the screen. And then we're going to go down the left-hand side first, okay? So the target list. And then we're going to make contact with the targets. I'll tell you exactly how to do that in a minute. And the target companies, and again, that's a little bit of jargon for you, the target company, the company that we're interested in buying, the target, is going to, they're going to contact us back if they're interested in selling. We're going to have a telephone call with them. We might sign an NDA. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. And then we're going to have a meeting to have a chat. Now, that meeting these days can be done by Zoom. You don't have to travel for that meeting. We're then going to look at some documents that they're going to send us. I'll tell you which documents to ask for later. And then we might have a second meeting on site. Now, this may be replaced by Zoom, depends on the type of business it is. If it's a business that requires the premises, maybe it's a location specific, or there's equipment that you want to see, or you want to see the setup, then clearly you have to be there in person. If it's a business where you're going to end up just buying the IT contracts, you probably don't want to see a room full of tables and chairs. You're not interested in that. So you've got to be flexible according to the circumstances. Now, At that second meeting, we're going to construct the deal. Now, this is a really important point I want to make, and I know that people get this wrong, is that they think they construct the deal, i.e., how much we're going to pay for the business, how we're going to pay for it, the structure of the deal in isolation while they're at home in their office. No way. What you've got to do, you want to put that deal together in front of them to get their buy-in to it and to get them to agree to it. So we've got something that everyone agrees with. We're then going to put that in writing, heads of terms. And again, while we are in front of them, not a different day, not later on, not that evening, you're going to fill in a heads of terms document, a template that says, Jonathan J, intend to buy the assets of XYZ Limited for £10,000, and this is how we're going to pay the £10,000. We're going to pay £1,000 on completion and £1,000 a month for the next 9 months thereafter. That might be the deal structure. But we do all this with the owner in their presence so that we can shake on it, put it into a heads of terms document, print it off and sign it. Now, that is how you do it. Let me tell you how people who don't know what they're doing do it. They have the meetings, they get all the accounts, they go away and they scratch their head and say, what can I come up with as a way of doing this deal? Then they put it all in writing, they send it over as an offer, because they think it's like buying a property. It's not. They send it over as an offer, and that offer is rejected or accepted. If the seller has any wherewithal at all, they will reject it. And they'll say, no, thank you. And then you've got to sit down and get the sweaty palms going because you're now sort of reconstructing the offer to send them a better offer, because you can't send them a worse offer because they've rejected the last one. You've got to send them a better offer. So you send them the better offer, off it goes to them, and they reject it. So do you see, it's just crazy. So you kind of, this offers going backwards and forwards, and you're training the owner to say no to you, because every time they say no to you, they get a better deal. That's why it has to be a collaborative process in their presence that everyone's happy with, all the decision makers are present. And then we start due diligence and the legal process. They run in parallel. Now, as a result of due diligence, we're going to renegotiate the price. Now, I'm going to teach you exactly during the course of the week, exactly how to do the heads of terms document, what to say, how to say it, and how to renegotiate this price. Because I'm going to give you some really clever things to put into the heads of terms document that make the price renegotiation really, really easy. And then we're going to complete the deal. And then people think, okay, you've agreed to buy the business for £100,000. The deal's completed. That can't change. Yes, it can. If you're buying shares as opposed to assets, you can actually adjust the payment for the business after you've bought it. People don't realize that. And again, I'll teach that to you during the course of this week. Now, I'm giving you an overview here, and we're not going to do all this today, clearly. We're going to do it across the course of the week in a logical order so that the knowledge and the information builds up. So let me now give you 10 places to find deals. Where do you find businesses to buy? Now, the first place is word of mouth. Just talk to people. And this is what you say. You say, I'm interested in buying an IT company. Would you know anyone who's interested in moving on? I don't typically say selling, I say moving on, because it's softer, it's a little bit more eloquent. Anyone who's thinking of moving on. And quite often, the person that I'm talking to is the person who has a business I'd be interested to find out more about. And that's when they say, well, maybe we can have a coffee. Because if I said to him, are you interested in selling your business? I have now depositioned myself from a negotiating perspective, because what's happening when I say, are you interested in selling your business? His eyes have got pound signs, dollar signs flicking around in them. And he's thinking, oh my goodness, here's someone's interested in selling my business. They've approached me. Well, I've now got the upper hand. Where if you say, look, do you know anyone who's interested in moving on? And they say, well, I'm interested. I say, well, does that apply to you? Yes, it does. Oh, right. They have now said to you they're interested in selling. You haven't It's the complete opposite. It's a complete role reversal. And you want them to come to you. You don't want to go to them. So talking to people is a very good way of doing it. Accountants typically know when it's typically the first port of call for anyone interested in exiting their business. They go to their accountant and say, look, I'm thinking of selling. What do you think I'll get for it? And then the next question is, well, yeah, how do we make it happen? So having a good relationship with some accountants is very good. Where do you start? Well, start with your own accountant. Go to your accountant and say, do you have any clients who are thinking of moving on from this particular sector? Now, growing a network of accountants is really quite a good thing to do. And you know something? There are conferences and exhibitions just for accountants. You might want to go along. Quite often they're free trade shows, for accountants. I know there's a big one in London every year. You go along and you just chat with people over coffee, and you hang around the sandwich bar and you talk to people and say, "How are you finding it?" Right? Okay. Oh, you're an accountant. Well, actually, I'm here because I'm interested in acquiring businesses. Now, so if you come across anyone who's interested in moving on in this sector, let me know and get their card and keep in touch. Because if you could build up maybe half a dozen accountancy firms that every time they know of someone in that sector who's interested in selling, there are accountancy firms that specialize in certain types of businesses. So we keep using the IT example, but to be fair, it's a really flexible example. There are accountants who specialize in doing the accounts for IT companies. So contact them, for example. There are websites with thousands of businesses for sale. There are in the UK. There's the business sale report. There's the reason I hesitate sometimes with these names is because they all quite similar. There's the buy biz. I mean, just Google it. I mean, you'll find business. There's Dalton's Weekly. There are even small online businesses for sale on eBay. I never look at them because I don't need to, because I've got really good deal flow. But those websites are out there. The downside is usually it's brokers listing them on the website, so you're back stuck with this broker thing. LinkedIn is a great source of finding businesses to buy. Again, using the same word of mouth wording of, do you know anyone who's thinking of moving on? Events, trade shows, and conferences. If you're interested in buying let's choose some sort of outdoor garden supply type business. Well, go along to the places that those businesses exhibit and do the word of mouth piece. Have the chat. Do you know anyone who's thinking of moving on? Business brokers, they're in at number 6. I mean, I really think you could do a lot better than business brokers. I really, really do. And I think that if you use the methodology I'm about to teach you, you'll understand why. I'm going to teach you how to use letters. Now, letters, for those of you under the age of 30 who've never seen a letter before, it's like an email that's been printed out, okay? And people used to put these things into envelopes and put stamps on them, put them in those red boxes, and they'd arrive the next morning on someone's doormat. I use letters, good old-fashioned letters. Right now, we're sending out 2,000 letters a week. I've got 9,000 letters going out to businesses in my sector. And I have masterminders send out hundreds of letters a week, sometimes thousands, depending upon how ambitious they are, how busy they want to be, and how keen they are to make an acquisition. I'm going to give you the format for those letters in just a moment's time. Oh, number 8 is also letters. And so's number 9, and so's number 10. So the point I'm making here is that letters are your number one source. Not emails, not sending emails, letters. Letters in envelopes are your number one source of finding businesses to buy, not trying to don't try and shortcut the process and say, oh, I'll just send emails. I want to use a letter because I want it to go to the owner. An email just goes into to a PA, to a receptionist. It goes into the junk mail. I want a letter to go into the hands of the owner. And I'm going to show you today how I do that. But let's talk about how business brokers work, because everyone's curious about this, despite me saying I think it's a terrible idea. They get paid to advertise the business for sale. They might be paid £2,000 to £25,000 plus. The sky is the limit. And then they would get paid to sell the business 2% to 8% of the sale value. And that is their little cherry on the cake, if you like, because they'd be quite happy just having that advertising fee, even if they never sell a single business. Quite frankly, selling the business is hard work that can take months. Listing the business for sale is sitting down with a business owner and saying, sign here. Okay. So in terms of effort, there's a huge, huge difference. Apparently, 80% of businesses that are listed for sale don't sell anyway, possibly because they are businesses that are not saleable, partly because the broker hasn't done a very good job. But business brokers do receive a lot of inquiries, deliberate typo, and they need to filter out the time wasters. The assumption that they make the moment you call up or email in is that you are a time waster. Very negatively, they assume that you are a time waster. And if you're interested in doing anything with a business broker, you need to prove otherwise. Okay. Now, let me tell you what that does not mean. That does not mean sending them a copy of your bank statement. And some brokers just want you to send a copy of your bank statement to prove that you are serious. Well, that's like playing poker for the first time with a bunch of professionals who say, you do realize you've got to show everyone your cards, and you naively say, oh, really? And show everyone your cards. And then you wonder why you lose. So business brokers are the professionals. They might not be very good most of the time, but they are the professionals. And if they can get you to show a bank statement or your line of funding from a bank, then they would love to see that, because believe me, if you've got £500,000 to spend, they will make sure that you are relieved of your £500,000. So the disadvantages are also they play buyers against each other. So a little bit like estate agents, you say, we showed 3 people around the property this morning, you better get in there quick. They'll do exactly the same with you. We've got several people interested in this business, very, very popular business. What I always say when anyone says that to me, and usually because I don't deal with brokers, it's always going to be the seller themselves. They say, we've got lots of people interested. I say, oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Well, clearly they were talking to you before me, and I don't want to step on their toes. So you've got my number. Deals have a habit of falling out of bed. So if they don't come to fruition, give me a call and we'll see what we can do. So you called their bluff, and they'll call you the next morning. They are professional sellers, remember, professional at selling businesses. They want to vet you to make sure that you're not a time waster, and vet you to see if you've got some money. That's all they're interested in, is your money. The advantages, to be balanced, is that they probably spent several months with the owner preparing the information that a buyer will want to see. They can exert pressure on the seller. So you might say, look, could you please say to your client, stop messing around. We've asked for this 3 times. They haven't provided it. We're going to pull out if they don't do it by Friday. Now, that's harder for you to say directly to the seller. But if it goes through the broker can be that bad cop. And they do help sellers know their numbers. They know that you as the buyer will want to know certain things. Most owners of SMEs have an appalling grasp of their own numbers. However, the broker would have helped the seller get those numbers together. Quite frankly, I do not think that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. But this is their process. They'll want you to complete a questionnaire, quite often asking if you've got any money. They want you to sign an NDA, nothing wrong with that. They want to see, POF is proof of funds. They want to see proof that you've got some money. They may prevent you from meeting the seller. Will want you to put in an offer to buy a business. And remember, as we've just said, we don't put in offers. We sit down and collaboratively come up with the deal. They will always insist that the buyer reject your offer. We can do better than that, they'll say. And Chinese whispers, they'll pass messages backwards and forwards, and you wouldn't believe actually how people get things wrong. Things just get wrong in the telling. If you are trying to buy a business without any of your own money, going the broker route is really, really difficult. Really, really difficult. You need to be going direct to the owner of the business. But when they ask you for proof of funds, let me tell you how you might deal with this. Because let's say you have got some money, but you don't really want to show your bank statement because that's just silly. The first thing is you bring it up first. So you might say something like this. You're probably wondering, yeah, if I have the ability to follow through on this deal. And that is the correct phrase, by the way, that I have the ability to follow through on this deal. And they might say, oh, well, yeah, I suppose so. So you've shown that you're professional. You've got in there first. So let me send you a letter from my bank or from my accountant, possibly a finance broker, but usually from my bank, my accountant, just assuring you that I'm a serious contender. Now, neither your bank nor your accountant, well, they might confirm a cash balance in a bank. They might say you have funds at this point in time, you have funds in excess of a certain amount. But they're not going to say you've got money if you haven't got money. Your accountant might be a little bit more pliable with this, and they might say, we've known this person for a number of years, we've acted for them for a dozen years, and we know that they have the ability to raise funds for specific deals, something like that. There will always be a massive caveat because these days everyone's worried about being sued, and they don't want to say something that implies that they are validating you, and then something goes wrong and they're sued because they provided a validation. And third, this is the most important, I would say, if you've got authority and confidence, no one ever questions you. And when I'm talking to the owners of businesses, very occasionally, someone says, how do we know that you've got the money to buy this business? Very occasionally. So I would say it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 30, probably more like 1 in 30. So the other 29 times, my authority and my confidence mean that no one even questions it. No one even doubts it for one moment. The 1 in 30 times is where maybe that seller's been burnt before. They've had their time wasted by a buyer who couldn't complete, couldn't follow through. So I say, well, you know what? That's a great question. That is a really, really good question. So let me just tell you what I've been doing recently. And I just wait until their body language relaxes, and then I know that I've won them over. If necessary, I can faff around with a letter, but I prefer not to. So that's how I deal with that. So let's talk about using letters to source deals. How do we use letters to source deals? Why do we use letters? Well, they're fast. So I can send a letter out today by first class post. It will arrive in most destinations around the UK tomorrow. They're predictable. So if I know that I get 10 responses by sending out X number of letters, and I want 20 responses, well, I can send out double the number of letters. And thirdly, they are scalable. So if I've got, let's say you've got 25,000 IT companies, and I can get inquiries from people who want to sell from the first 100 letters that I send, then quite clearly I'm going to get more, and I've got 25,000 to go to. Oh my goodness, I will have no problem putting together a group of businesses here. Now, sometimes people say to me, Jonathan, I've got a market that's very, very small. There are only 25 businesses in this market. I say, okay, well, you might buy one of those businesses, but the odds aren't so great, are they? So that's where you need to go back to my 6 different types of businesses to buy and say, maybe I'm too narrow in my search. Maybe I need to open it up and look for the products, the services, the suppliers, the complementary, the competitors, and the distribution channels. So maybe I need to widen my search, because if there are only 25 businesses that you could buy, you could be waiting just for a long time for one of those people to want to sell. Let's stack the cards in your favor, and let's go and find, be more creative about what type of business you want to buy, and find sectors where there are thousands of businesses, your chances of success just skyrocket through the roof if you can do that. So with the letter, I would say use the DMA template. Now, I know this has been sent to every one of you. There's always someone who says, I didn't get it, in which case this is what you do. You email the office, hello@thedealmakersacademy.com. So it'd be the same email that you got, the same email that gave you the link to today's webinar, and ask Maria to send it again. Maria sends it to every single person without fail. We don't miss out important things like this. And you will have been sent it. If you haven't received it, look in your junk mail, look in all the places that we have to look. And then if you still can't find it, ask Maria for a copy of it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up one of those letters onto the screen. Let's see if I can do this here. Okay. No, that's not it. Hang on, let me do this. So share screen, and is this one here? Okay, right. There you go. So this is this is a letter that I used a little while ago. When I read it through this morning, I realized it's slightly dated. There's a couple of references that mean it's slightly dated. I'll tell you what they are in a second. So this is on a plain piece of paper. It's not on a letterhead. I do not suggest for one moment you start creating logos and letterheads to make out that you're some big investment company when you're not. I actually think that turns people off. I think it's the personal approach always works better. If you are known in your sector, then you might write in your company letterhead, because being known actually helps you. But if no one knows you, then you might use just a plain piece of paper. This is what I've done many occasions. So here I'm talking to nursery owners. And by the way, when I give you these templates, you have to adapt them and personalize them to your purpose. You don't have to follow it word for word. These are really used as examples for you to inspire you. Please excuse this out of the blue approach. I thought it was the best way to contact you privately and confidentially. There's quite a bit of curiosity going on there. This is me, and after selling my business earlier this year, I've been looking for the next business challenge. I'm writing to you on behalf of myself and my partner. Okay, here's the thing. I had someone, he actually was someone on Mastermind, who used this letter, and he contacted me and he said, Jonathan, someone's contacted me from the letter, brilliant, but they want to know which business I sold last year. I said, well, just tell them which business you sold last year. He said, well, I didn't. I said, what do you mean you didn't? He said, well, I just copied your letter. And I said, but you missed the point. You can't use my backstory. You've got to have your own backstory. This is where you personalize it to your, and that is an absolutely true story. He'd put that, he didn't think for one moment to personalize it. I have a 19-month-old daughter. You can tell how old this letter is because she's 4 now. In fact, this is probably the first letter I used for this sector. I've been visiting several nurseries recently to find the one that's right for her. This led to me be interested in buying a day nursery, and while searching in Google, my partner came across your nursery. Of course, I don't know your personal plans for the nursery, but wondered whether we might be able to have a telephone conversation and see what the possibilities are. I know that some owners are thinking about retiring, getting out of the industry, and they don't want to sell out to the big chains. It's interesting, I spoke to a couple of owners, and that was a big thing for them. They did not want to sell to a corporate because they did not want their personal business suddenly, the sign changed over the door and everything. So that was the little hot button that I found in the sector that I use. So when you find a hot button, you put your hot button in there. I don't mind if attendance is down recently. Now it's interesting because knowing what I know now, I'd have changed that language. I wouldn't have said attendance, I'd have said occupancy, because that's the correct way of putting it. Would you mind calling me, texting me on, and this is where I put my mobile number, or emailing me on, and this is my email address. And I just use a Gmail address, right? Nothing fancy. We're in a position to move quickly in the right circumstances. I can assure you of strict confidence, and I'm happy to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Hardly anyone ever does, but I put it in there for the people that it's a big deal. Now, the criteria, my acquisition criteria, and I believe this would have been a test, actually, this one, registered for 70 plus children, and comes with freehold property. We don't want to pay rent. In actual fact, our acquisition criteria has changed, where we don't want freehold property, we want to lease ourselves. So there it is, very, very simple letter. And if you just take that and adapt that to your purposes, you will find that you can you'll get a really good result. Now, you've also been sent a second letter, which is a slightly longer version. And people report that they get a better result with the short version rather than the longer version. So just a little bit of feedback that will help you there. So that's the DMA template that we're talking about. And then personalize it. We just said that. Plain paper versus headed paper. I think we've covered that already. Who is it from? Yeah, just put your own name. If you don't want to put your own name from it, maybe put your partner's name, or if you've got a PA or a VA, use that person's name. It's not. Everyone thinks these things are a major deal until you've done them. I mean, all we're trying to do is get someone to call us, and then when let's say calls and says, "Well, why did you put your PA's name on the letter, not your name?" And I say, "Well, because I wanted this to be between us. I wanted this to be confidential." It doesn't quite make sense, but it's one of those things that go, "Oh, right, yeah, confidential." Everyone goes, "Yeah, no, confidential, very confidential." How does someone respond? I would always suggest two methods of response: a phone number, and invite people to WhatsApp you or text you, and an email address. I'd always give people two methods of responding. And don't worry about how many. I see people sort of do I only got 3% response, or someone else I know got 7% response. The response rates don't matter. You are looking to buy one business, okay? Really, one response might do it. So if you send out 100 letters and you get one response, or send out 100 letters and get 10 responses, and I have clients who get more than 10 from 100 letters in some cases, that response percentage is irrelevant, because quite frankly, you're not going to buy them all anyway. So don't worry too much about that. And I would suggest that you start identifying sellers right now. Start doing it right now. So we need to get that letter out the door. Stamp versus frank. Do you put a stamp on it or do you frank it? I always have a first class stamp on it. Even those 9,000 that are going out right now, they all have red first class stamps on them. I use a nice white window envelope so the address shows through, because I think it just looks a little bit smarter. In the UK, the only things that come in brown envelopes are unpleasant letters from HMRC. So I always try to avoid those. Handwritten versus print. Some people say, well, do I handwrite the envelopes or print them? Now, you might handwrite if you're sending out 10, but something, if you're sending out hundreds of these, then you'll be putting them into a window. You'll be printing off the letters from your, doing a mail merge and printing off the letters from your computer, from your printer, and then just getting them folded and putting them in. Children are very good at folding letters and putting them in envelopes, I've discovered. So they kind of think it's a game, which is great for the first 20 or 30. But if you're going to be sending out hundreds of thousands, there are mailing services that can do this for you. And I would be just Googling those. You don't want one of these services like Doc Mail, where you just upload your data, pay the postage with a credit card, and it all does it for you. Doc Mail send out horrible looking letters. They look like automated letters. You want the recipient to feel that they are the only person you are writing to. And sometimes they actually do think that you're the only person they are writing to. They certainly don't know that you're sending out volume. Quantity, when someone says this doesn't work, then I just ask, how many have you sent out? And they go, well, 10. Well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's why it didn't work. So you got to have some volume in there. And why not use an automated service? I've just said. So how do we handle responses? Well, we handle responses. Obviously, the text messages are easy. You can just deal with those as and when you want to. But when someone calls you and you cannot talk, it's inconvenient, always just make sure you've jotted down their name and their number and call them back when you're ready. You never want someone to catch you on the back foot. I always remember a guy in Mastermind was telling me about a time that he was driving and the person called and he had to pull over and he was scribbling on something in the car to take down notes of the. And I said, how did you feel? He said, oh, it was just chaos. I said, that's because you should have just taken their details and called them back when you are in control, when you're sitting at your desk and you're in control. Make a record of every call, because you may think you can remember who's who, but after you receive 7 phone calls, well, after you receive 3, actually, you won't know who's who. It will all blur into one. You will not remember a thing. So take notes while the person's talking. Say, I hope you don't mind, I'm just taking some notes. And the reason why is because I've received a lot of calls today. And this kind of blows your cover that you haven't sent it to just one person. But I quite like putting the seller under some pressure to make them realize they are not the only one I'm talking to. I want them to shape up. I don't want them to feel that they can call all the shots. I'm speaking to several people in your sector who want to sell their business. So I want them to woo me. I want them to show off a little bit about their company. I use a system called Circle Loop. Now you can download the app onto your phone, and it is it's a website as well. And for a very, very small amount of money, I can buy a mobile number. I think putting a mobile number on the letter is better than using a landline. And I can buy a mobile number. It just doesn't cost the person who phones it any more than any mobile number. And when the Circle Loop app rings on my phone, I know that it is a call from a letter. So it's different to a call coming through from the normal means on your phone. Now, the wonderful thing about Circle Loop is that it automatically records every single phone call. Now, I know some people might have an issue with this, and that's not really what we're here to debate. But what I would be doing is I'd be going back and I'd be listening to those calls to see later what you can improve. Tomorrow, I'll tell you exactly what you want to be saying on those calls, okay? So don't worry about what you say. I'll teach you that tomorrow. But I'm just setting you up to get ready for that, taking this in a logical sequence. The call should probably be no more than 20 minutes on that first one. I think that if someone tells you their life story, which quite often can be 50% of the call, and then we get back to the beginning, you kind of can talk yourself out of it. So this is a listening call, no more than 20 minutes. And you might eventually want to use a virtual assistant to do this for you. Okay, not a call center. I'm talking about an individual who you have trained how to do this phone call. Now, this is why you need to do it first. You need to be the person who gets good at this. Otherwise, you can't teach someone else to do it, okay? But virtual assistants can then free you up so they can screen all the calls, and then you can decide which ones are the interesting ones. So what have we covered today? We've covered about having the right mindset. So we're talking about being open and positive, thinking about your strategy, finding businesses to buy, and we've only just started. There is so much more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you now to ask me some questions about what we've been talking about. There's a little Q&A box up there in the top of the screen. So just type your question into there, and I will be able to answer those questions. Now, while you're typing away, and you don't have to, because probably every question that's asked will be in everyone else's head anyway. I'm just going to go and fill my glass up with some water, because I've been talking for, an hour and 50 minutes nonstop. So let me just go and fill my glass up with water, and I will come back and answer those questions. Okay, right, I'm back. Okay, I've got some questions here from people right at the beginning. Hi, Paul Palmer, are you sharing the recording? Yes, you'll get all these recordings every day. Don't worry about that. You get all the recordings. Right. Okay, so let me just go through the questions that I've been asked earlier during the webinar. How do you find, hi, anonymous attendee, you didn't fill in your name when you signed up for Zoom. How do you find distressed businesses? Can you be put on a list? Now, look, I'm going to show you how to answer some of these questions yourself. So let's just think about this. What is a distressed business? Well, usually it's a distressed owner who just wants to sell their business. There isn't a list, is there? There isn't a place where you go and say, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about selling my business. Oh, I need to notify someone. It doesn't work like that. How do you find them? I know you asked this question right back at the top of the webinar. I think I probably answered it now. You send out letters. You don't know if they're distressed or not until they come back to you, until they respond to you. Okay, right. Someone has just asked me not to mention their name when I read out this comment. So I respect that. I will not mention this person's name, but this is going to make everyone on the webinar chuckle, okay? So this person says, please don't mention my name if you read out this comment. I'm a business broker. This could be awkward. I'm a business broker and everything you said about us lot is true. Okay. Okay, well, first of all, welcome. You are amongst friends here and I will never hold it against you, okay? Okay, all right. Getting the same questions twice sometimes. All right. Are the websites with businesses for sale not the same, not just the same as brokers? Yes, I think I did say this. So most of the businesses that are listed on websites that list businesses for sale have been listed by brokers. That is absolutely the case. Occasionally by owners, usually by brokers. That's why I don't use them, because it really is as much of a muchness as most of them are listed there by brokers. Okay. All right, so I've got lots of questions here and I want to answer all of them or as many as reasonably possible. And I will tell you later how you can ask me questions between the webinars, okay? Hi, Phil. You mentioned about searching for owners over age 55. How can you search for this information? Right, here's the thing. How do you get your data to send the letters to? All right. How can you get the data to send the letters to? Well, there's a category of people out there called list brokers, and they either manage the lists for, let's say, a publication, so the subscriber list for a publication, or they can obtain companies' house data according to the coding that people use when they have a company that does a certain thing. It requires a code on the company's house. Also, the age of the directors is a searchable field by some of these list brokers. So that's where you find that information. Hi, David. You said the response rate of the letters doesn't matter, but can you give us an idea of what to expect as a reasonable conversion rate? Now, do you mean conversion rate from people that you speak to people that you might end up buying a business? Well, it depends how picky you are over your criteria. I would say that it will be a small percentage, which is why you need lots of people to speak to. That, if you just don't, if you want to buy any business that does anything, then your conversion rate is going to be hugely high. If you want to buy a very specific business in a specific area, a specific size, then clearly that's going to reduce your conversion rate. Same David says, any tips for saving money on the letters? Well, the postage is the postage, the envelope is the envelope, the letter is the letter. So unfortunately, you kind of just pay. It works out typically at about £1. In the UK, it's 70 pence. Is it 70 pence, 71p for a first class stamp? Don't skimp on second, send it first. And you might spend 30p for the letter, the envelope, and to get someone to stuff it. Vincent says, do you find out if they are single owners, financial position, and opportunities for growth? Do you find this out on the first call or from the documentations you request? Well, both, and we're covering that tomorrow. Chris says, what is the smallest business you would be interested in? It needs to be big enough to cover debt service, pay a manager, and pay you. Yes, absolutely. So it depends how much debt you're covering, paying a manager, and how much you want to pay yourself. So it's an all depends question. If you want to take out of the business £10,000 a month, then the business needs to make a profit of £120,000 a year after it's paid everything. If you only want to take out £50,000 a month, then obviously the profit only has to be £50,000 a month. How expensive are list brokers? Well, you don't pay the list broker, you pay for the rental of the data, and that all depends. It can be a couple of £100 per thousand. I would be very suspicious of cheap data. Mo says, what's stopping the business owner from going to a broker once we've engaged with them to buy their business? Well, nothing. They can do what they want. It's their business. But what does stop them doing that is signing heads of terms, and we cover that later in the week. Right. Okay. I've got 36 questions. So I would say, guys, pause on sending me questions, because I won't be able to answer any more questions. And there's going to be lots of duplication, anyway. Raphael says, is it all right to pick addresses for companies and owners' house as part of the search for deal flow? Well, there used to be a requirement in the UK where directors had to list their home addresses. That's no longer a requirement, so it's harder to find the home addresses of directors now. Is it possible to buy a property portfolio held in a limited company in the same way that you're going to show us later how to structure buying normal businesses? Yes, it is, but we're doing that on another day, okay? Do you contact some business owners twice? I won't stop sending them letters. I'll send them a letter every month forever until they tell me to go away, or I decide that I'm no longer interested in that business. Could you give us names of some list broker companies? Well, Mark, it's as simple as just going to Google. I don't use list brokers. I have a different way of getting my data, which is specific to my sector. There are so many. There's Experian, there's Credit Safe, there's loads. So if you go into Google and just type business list brokers, you'll have plenty. Remember, they typically get their data from the same place. So you're looking for maybe the people that you just get on with as from customer service perspective. Don McComb says, what do you do with interested businesses what do you do with interested businesses that you will not progress with? So if someone approached me and we're not interested, we just tell them that we're not interested. Right, I'm definitely going to not answer questions that are related to future topics, okay? So Alex, good question. Do you ever get pushback on signing heads of terms there and then with the owner? I need my lawyer to check this. Yes, occasionally. We'll cover that on the day that we do the heads of terms, okay? How would you go about finding a contingent fee lawyer if you have not done a deal? Well, it's very hard, because what you're basically saying here, hi Craig, is I want you to work for nothing. I'm only going to pay you if the deal completes. And by the way, I've never done this before, so I don't have a track record. So it's really hard, isn't it, to say that to someone? Why don't you just pay the lawyer a fee, but you pay them after the deal has completed? Now, if the deal aborts, then you pay them a lower fee that you would obviously. So those of you who are still typing questions in, could I ask you to stop? Because the questions that I'm going to answer here will cover just about everything, and you can always send me questions later in the week, okay? Right. Sanjeev says, hi Sanjeev, hi Sanj. When eventually selling my business, is there a universal multiple of EBITDA that should be applied to establishing the valuation? No, there isn't. No, there isn't. It depends upon the market. It depends upon the sector. So many different things. And Powan says, does the multiple apply to industry or sector? Yes, absolutely it does. Yeah, absolutely. Software as a service, hot sector, high multiples. Don says, is there any tips to look for in making the deal team? Yeah, we're talking about that later in the week. Carola says, could you elaborate more on the deal fee? I need to know what you mean by that, okay? I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Not every deal may be able to pay a deal fee. Absolutely right. Not every deal can pay a deal fee. I have people in Mastermind who are only interested in buying businesses where a deal fee can be part of the financing and they can make money on day one. That's the only thing they're interested in. They're not particularly interested in the sector, just in a business that can pay a deal fee, something worth considering. How do you go, Akin says, how do you put a deal fee into your deal payment structure? Well, the seller of the business never knows what you're going to do with the money. I mean, that's none of their business. What you do post completion with your money is entirely up to you. So that's not something that you tell the seller. Joseph asked a really good question that that's a good question to answer. Would you recommend looking at more than one sector to find a platform business? Yes, I would. You see, if you're not sure, why don't you send 500 letters to businesses in that sector, 500 letters to businesses in that sector, and chat with business owners from both sectors and just find out, what's going on in that sector. Find out what's for sale. Find out what's available. So Michael says, dear Jonathan, I'm in the consumer health business. Locally, there are not that many companies available, but Europe-wise, there are. Broaden the region or broaden the scope. Maybe both. Remember what we said? 6 different types of businesses to buy. When it's time to sell, are business brokers useful? Says Chris. Hi, Chris. Well, think about this. Think about how terrible they are to selling businesses. We said that they're not interested in really selling, because that's too much like hard work. They're not interested in, they're just interested in getting the upfront fee. So if you think about that, then do you want that type of person to sell your business? There are far smarter ways to sell a business, but to be fair, that's slightly out of the scope of today. We might talk about it a bit more on Friday. David says, have you always sent 2,000 letters a week? No, I haven't, because if I sent 2,000, no, I haven't is the answer. Seems like a lot. Well, it's all relative, I suppose. I have masterminders sending more, by the way, than that. Are you ramping up because of the virus? I'm ramping up because there's a change in the sector that is because of coronavirus. Yes. Simon Clark, could you please elaborate around the reasons to avoid a franchise and if there are exceptions? Well, I don't sure if I can elaborate more than what I said, because a franchise is so tightly controlled by the franchisor, you won't be able to do the things that you want to do to potentially improve the business. If you think about it, there are so many businesses that you could buy. Why buy one that has so many restrictions placed upon it? Yeah, of all the choices, why do a tough one? Yeah, that's really what I would say. Hi Dale, you mentioned you like distressed businesses, but you didn't mention the Gazette. So the Gazette is where businesses that have gone into administration are listed. Well, at that point, they have already gone into administration. If you want a distressed business, typically you want a business that's prior to administration. So they're thinking, oh my goodness, we need to get out of this. And I find those people buy letters. If they've gone into admin, then I find them by contacts with administrators. But you're right, the Gazette online is a good place for that as well. Yes. Right. Okay. Let's have a little look at these questions. No more questions, please. People are still typing me questions. No more questions, because otherwise I won't be able to answer them and they'll just be disappointed. So, okay, let's. Ian says, where are you? It looks beautiful and hot. Have you spotted that I'm not in London? It is beautiful and it is hot. Okay, right. Right. David says, 7 times multiple selling a business seems like a lot. It's not actually. No, it's not. It would be for some sectors, but it's not for others. How do you manage the manager running the business? Well, that's the thing. How do you manage the manager running the business? That's where your management structure comes into play. Right. Okay. Some people are still typing me questions. Guys, hold on, please. Hold on to the questions. We're together all week. Okay. Doesn't have to be today. We're together all week. Right, because otherwise I'm going to have to start missing ones here. Raphael says, is finding someone to run the business for me a paid employee of the business or part of the deal team? No, your deal team would be accountant, lawyer, tax, HR, due diligence, finance broker, those sorts of people. So someone who runs the business is an employee. Okay. So Alex, I think I've answered your question about where you can find a mailing list of manufacturing and engineering companies. I think I've already answered that. Ian says, how do I come up with your strategy for nurseries? Why do you land on that sector? Well, what I said in that letter, the letter I showed you, is absolutely true. I was looking around nurseries with my daughter, and I thought this could be interesting. Did a bit of research online, saw there's lots of M&A activity, and it's an unconsolidated, fragmented market with potential. So it kind of ticked all those boxes. Can you give, Talit says, can you give some idea of the timeline from sending a letter to closing the deal? Well, it depends how good you are. That's really what it comes down. How good you are. Because if you don't know what you're doing, it can take a very long time. If you're good, it can be fast. The fastest I've ever done, I would take it from speaking to the business owner, not sending out the letter, but speaking to the business owner is 4 days. That's the fastest I've ever done. Raham, you asked me how to find a list of companies in a certain industry, how to find the size of company. Yep, I've already answered that with the list brokers. Where do I look for an energy consulting business? Same answer, list brokers. This is what I mean about there's always going to be duplication of questions. Okay, another question about franchises. You said about not buying a franchise, which I understand. What if you could buy the franchisor and have all the existing franchisees from day one? Any major downsides? No, I guess if you're the franchisor, no. Off the top of my head, no downsides on that. Do you outsource the sending of the letters? Are there companies that you use for writing and sending the letters? Well, when you say writing, you've created the letter, I suppose. I think you mean printing, yeah? Printing and sending the letters. Yes, they are called mailing houses. Again, just Google mailing houses. They all do the same job. Andrew, you've got several questions here. Would you agree that the most important thing that the deal can do is two things: pay the debt service, pay you an income? Yes, if you're looking for cash flow, yes, they would be the two. They would be the two most important things. Yeah, absolutely. How do you handle the? Samuel says, how do you handle the proof of funds request when they are insistent on seeing funds, i.e., they will not progress any further until they see this? Well, the thing is, it is you. Let's say you're buying a business for £500,000, and you've got £500,000 sitting in the bank, and they want you to prove that you've got £500,000, but we're only going to be paying £50,000 on day one and the balance over several years. The moment you show them that you've got £500,000, that's all they want. I mean, it completely. I'd just move on. I'd have so many deals. I'd just move on. I wouldn't be bothered. I'd just move on. Sorry, your first name and your surname have been merged into one by Zoom. Sorry for asking another question, but I read your book and I bought a business. Wow, that's pretty good after reading a book. I'm now stuck in the day-to-day and can't get out. You see, book only takes you so far. Seems the manager always needs me and keeps making mistakes. So what is the question? What is the question? Can I, someone else, anonymous attendee, what I would also say, when you sign into Zoom, always use your name, fill in your name, because otherwise I can't address you by name. It's not much fun just calling someone anonymous. Hi, anonymous. Can I buy a company without having the nationality or residency of the country? I don't know is the answer. How many countries are there in the world? I mean, I don't know, because every country is going to be different. Every country is going to have its own rules. I would just Google buying a business in, and then put the country that you want to buy a business in, and then it will tell you what the rules are for that country. That's what I would do. I mean, I don't. I mean, you don't even say which country, so I don't know. But I would also say is buying your first business. Don't buy it in a country that you don't live in. All right, buy it just down the road. Buy it in your region. because it's just so much easier that way. Okay, it's so much easier that way. So I've actually answered. I didn't think I was going to get through them. Now, I've answered every single question that you've sent in. We've crossed over our 2-hour sort of guideline a little bit as well, which is absolutely fine. It's the first one, and I want to make sure I did answer all of your questions. If you've got any question on what we've been talking about today, not what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 days, but what we've been talking about today, which you would like me to, that I haven't answered, then this is what you do during the course of the week. You don't have to send it right now, but over the course of the week, hello@thedealmakersacademy.com, hello@thedealmakersacademy.com. Maria, who's been looking after you up till now, will receive those messages and will send them to me. You won't get a reply back within minutes, but you'll get a reply back within 24 hours, okay? Not within minutes, but within 24 hours. And I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching you what I absolutely love, which is what you say on the phone and how you put the deal together, how you negotiate the deal, how you talk about money, how you talk about value. It's a great one tomorrow. It's a really full 2 hours. We'll be starting on the dot at 2 o'clock, okay? On the dot at 2 o'clock. So please be with me just before 2. I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you got pages and pages of notes. Thank you for all the great questions. And I will see you tomorrow for part 2. And I hope you are having fun as well, learning this new stuff. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Have a good evening, and I will see you all tomorrow. Okay, bye, everyone.